look at the actual operation in working safely and efficiently. We're going to talk an awful lot about communication. And we're going to go through something we call the command and response system, which is a way for the ground person and the arborist aloft to communicate.
We're going to take a look at some rope handling techniques and a few knots you need to know. We'll also look at chainsaw use and think a little bit about logical work sequence.
Boy, we have a lot to do.
We better get going.
Sure. One of the first things a ground person might do when arriving at the job site is assist the climber in getting into the tree. There are a number of ways we could do this. Might use a ladder propped against the tree to get the climber into the tree, or the climber may actually climb from the ground. If the climber is going to climb from the ground, he's going to be secured from the moment he leaves the ground. Assisting us with the climbing today is Ken Palmer of Arbor Master Training. Ken, glad to have you here.
Glad to be here, Peter.
Nice to have you. What we're going to demonstrate first is a means for Ken to body thrust into the tree, using me to take slack and to give him a little bit of muscle assistance. Ken, if you would explain that.
Okay, I've got my Blake's hitch tied here on the climbing line, and I've got a micro pulley on the climbing line itself, just below the climbing hitch. I've got it tethered in this case with a dog leash snap. So as you keep tension, and actually what you're going to be doing is tending the slack as I climb, okay? Down here in the lower part of the tree, it's really not ideal for body thrusting in the sense that my feet won't be tightly against the tree because of the rope angle. So I'm going to tend to swing a little bit, but you can help me by the way you position yourself.
Okay.
Once I get into the limbs of the tree, I'll start to climb the tree itself, and you can continue to help me by tending the slack by keeping pressure on the climbing line.
Okay, you're the boss.
All right, Peter, let's do it. Climbing. Okay, I'm going to spin around here, and I've got some dead wood here, Peter. Stand clear while I check it to see how secure it is.
All clear.
Okay, I think it'll be all right. You can continue to tend my slack, and I'll climb.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Peter.
The climber can sometimes use a ladder to access the tree, and of course it's the ground person's responsibility to assist him with that ladder. Here's a good rule of thumb for setting a ladder. If you place your feet at the ladder's base and reach with outstretched arms, your fingers should just touch the rails. When the climber is ascending, we want to make sure we foot that ladder and support it until he's off the ladder. And then of course once the climber is in the tree, we want to get the ladder out of the work area and properly stowed back on the truck. Another technique that the climber might use to get into a tree is called secured footlock. You can see in this case that Ken is using a prusik loop secured with a prusik hitch to his climbing line. And basically with this technique, the climber is going to be under his own power to get into the tree, and there's very little that the ground person can do to assist with the actual climb.
That's right, Peter. I'm going to be sliding the prusik up both parts of my climbing line as I footlock into the tree. So that's going to be securing me as I climb. But in this case, I want to start doing a little work on this lowest limb. And what you can do to help me is swing me over to that limb, because it's a little far for me to reach, it looks like, from here.
Okay, you got it.
Okay, stand clear.
All clear.
Climbing. Okay, Peter, you want to swing me over there? Thank you. Excellent.
Now that we have Ken in the tree, we've gone ahead and installed a second climbing line, which we call the access line. The access line can be very helpful to us, particularly in a huge tree like this one, to get access to that tree if we have an aerial emergency. When Ken gets ready to start lowering some limbs, we're going to pull this access line out of the work area.
While the climbers are getting set up in the trees, there's a lot of things that we can be doing on the ground to get ready. We want to get the tools off the truck and start setting up our work site. We've also taken our rescue bag off the truck. The rescue bag has some climbing gear and a first aid kit, and we're going to need this to be ready in case there's any emergency. We've also set up a refueling area here. You can see we have a tarp and we've set it up in a mulched area. We want to make sure we avoid getting any kind of fuel or oil mix on the pavement or on the lawn. Now with us today we have Tim Ard of Forest Applications Training Incorporated, and he's going to tell us a little bit about refueling and maintenance before operation. How you doing, Tim?
Great, Sharon, thanks. Well, since we have our work area all set here, we also want to think a couple things as far as you never want to be smoking or have any type of flammable item around your fueling area, and always move your fueling area about 10 feet away from your work site if possible there. As we start to look over our saws here, it's a good time to make a quick check of any items that may be missing or cracked or loose screws, this type of thing. Also, we can do a quick check of our chain tension here to make sure that it's snug and ready to go for our operators. And here we want it just to be snug back into the bar and move freely around with a gloved hand. And here as we start to inspect, we want to make sure too that our fuels and oils are in good shape. In the reservoir here on the front is where your bar lubricant is applied, and here on the rear is the fuel cap and opening here. We can apply the oil as well as the fuel mix, and then making sure there's no spills here in this area, just take a quick wipe with a rag. As you put the caps back in, you want to make sure that they seat tightly and no chance of leak there for the fuel or oil. Once all of that is prepared, we can quickly get our saws ready, and this climbing saw is ready to go up the tree to the workers. We can start it up and shut it back off, making sure it's going to start up easily for them in the process.
Sharon, would you send me up a pole saw, please?
Sure thing, Ken. This is one of the other duties of a ground worker. From time to time, a climber's going to need various tools or equipment up in the tree, and the ground worker needs to be able to tie them on. In this case, I'm going to attach the pole saw to Ken's line using a midline clove hitch. I start by making a loop, and I want the standing part of the line on the inside of the loop. I twist a second loop up into it such that the running part of the line is also on the inside of the loop. Then what I do is attach the clove hitch to the pole saw, making sure to keep the line away from the blade. All set, Ken?
Okay, stand clear, hauling away.
Then I help guide the tool up into the tree. Now after the climber detaches the tool, a lot of times there'll be a bight of rope hanging down, and it helps if the ground worker pulls the slack out of the line.
Thank you.
Make sure your saw is firmly supported with the chain brake on before you start it. When you operate a chainsaw on the ground, you must wear chainsaw leg protection in addition to your normal PPE. Make sure of your footing before you start cutting. Avoid cutting with the bar tip, especially the upper quadrant of the bar tip. Operate the saw away from your legs and feet. Use natural barriers, such as limbs, between you and your saw. Running a chainsaw in a tangle of brush introduces kickback hazards, trip hazards, and struck-by hazards from limbs under tension. Trees, segments of trees, limbs, or saplings bent under tension have to be cut with caution. Try to find the direction of force acting upon the piece and cut in a way that won't bind or pinch the saw bar or chain or create kickback. Here Tim uses a notch and undercut to lower the trunk to the ground. Plastic or soft metal wedges can be used to prevent binding when cutting large pieces. block logs with pieces of wood or other suitable material to keep them from rolling. When more than one worker is limbing or bucking a tree, each needs to be aware of the other's location and activity. Out here on a tree crew, it takes a lot of coordination and communication between the people aloft and the people on the ground. As a ground person, you need to know when it's safe to enter the drop zone under a tree and when it might not be. And the climber obviously needs to know where we are on the ground at all times. So we use a verbal command and response system to communicate. We use commands such as stand clear from the climber, all clear from the ground person to indicate when it's safe to get in under the tree and when it's not. There are some instances where we can't use a verbal command and we have to use hand signals, but the principle is the same.
All right, stand clear.
All clear. A good tree crew plans its work so that it can be carried out efficiently. The work you do on the ground must be coordinated with what's happening in the air. Depending on the site, it may be safe and efficient for you to prune what you can on nearby trees while the climber is still getting into position. So long as you can make proper pruning cuts, this increases the overall efficiency of the job. Once the work is underway, your goal on the ground is to try to keep pace with the work in the tree. For pruning, this means keeping the area under the tree relatively clear of debris, but staying out of the landing zone when limbs are being cut. For a rigging operation, this means trying to keep the landing zone clear of large entanglements, keeping the climber's line clear of brush, and sending up and handling lines. The climber or bucket operator typically prefers to remove large pieces to speed the job along. That means that on the ground, you will have to clear brush, cut up wood, and reduce large pieces for the chipper. Think about a logical work sequence when you are inspecting the site and developing a work plan.
Ready for the block and rigging line.
All right, in order to send the block up to Ken, I'm first going to thread the rigging line through the block so that I can send them up together. After I thread it through, I'm going to put a slip knot in the end so that the line can't pull back through. I make a loop, pull a bite through the loop, tighten it down. That stops the line from going through. Now, to attach the block to Ken's climbing line, I'm going to use a sheet bend. That's probably the most common knot used for sending a line up to a climber. Once again, I make a loop, thread the other line up through the loop, around the standing part, back down through the loop, dress and set the knot. Block's on, Ken!
Okay, hauling away, stand clear.
All clear!
Sharon has already sent the rigging up to Ken that he's going to need in the top of the tree in order to lower out these big dead limbs. While he's busy doing that, we're going to set rigging at the base of this tree so that we can handle the lines properly. We're going to be fixing a friction device on the base of the tree, this device here. Now there are a number of different ways we could do that. The way we're going to choose on this tree, because of the size of the tree, the girth of the tree, combined with the length of our dead eye or fixed eye sling, is what's called a timber hitch. To fashion a timber hitch, we're basically going to create a bite in the rope and install a minimum of 5 tucks to hold that bite, which Bob is doing now. There are alternatives for fixing something on the base of the tree. Another good alternative is something called a cow hitch. A cow hitch requires that you double over the sling and therefore would require either a much larger sling or a much smaller tree. We also want to make sure that we have these tucks going in the right direction. We're going to be pulling on this line off to your right, therefore we want the tucks going to the left. That way we can pull against the bite in the rope. Pulling into the bite of the rope would have a tendency to loosen this attachment. Another useful knot for creating an anchor point on a tree is called a cow hitch. A cow hitch might be used with a block by the climber up in the top of the tree, or by us ground people down at the base of the tree with a friction device. To tie a cow hitch, you start out with a bight in the rope long enough to reach around the trunk you want to tie it on. The bight goes around, the block and the tail go through that bight, and then you want to cinch the block up tight to the tree. Now, if this were a larger diameter trunk, I would have to walk my rope around the tree in this fashion. Create the bight, come around, feed the tail again through that bight. Now, regardless of how I tied it, at the end of this, I have to secure this hitch with a half hitch around the splice in the rope. And then I'd want to neaten it up by taking my tail and making a couple tucks on the back side of the tree. On the ground, we lower limbs using friction. And it's nice to be able to manage that friction. In this instance, we're using a friction device at the base of the tree. There are several advantages of using a friction device over taking wraps around the tree, sometimes called spiral wraps. Those advantages include less wear and tear on the rope, easier setup and dismantle. We can get from one set to the next set much more quickly, and the ability to add and subtract friction to suit our needs.
Line handlers have to communicate well and coordinate their actions to protect people and property. As well as to put the limbs where they want them. It is a very good idea to wear gloves for this operation.
Ken's getting set up for his next cut, and I want to get the lowering line back up to him. He's about 20 feet below the block, so I want to tie a slip knot in his lowering line so that it won't run through the block. I'm going to measure out about 20 feet, tie a slip knot. That should give him enough rope to work with. Now when Ken's ready, he just gives a little tug on that line and that slip knot comes right out.
As you gain a little bit more experience, you'll become a valuable second pair of eyes for the climber. Sometimes the groundman can see things up in the tree that the climber can't spot, so it helps out to point out certain branches that need to be trimmed or to make sure tools aren't left in the tree.
All right, Sharon, do you see anything else in this area before I move on?
This section looks pretty good. You got one more out that way and two on the back side.
All right, I see those. I'm going to move on then. Stand clear.
All clear.
By reviewing this video and Workbook Chapter 4, you should know the proper way to raise and lower, set and stow a ladder. Be able to demonstrate proper chainsaw fueling and field maintenance. Understand the proper techniques for limbing, bucking, and cutting limbs under tension. Be able to use the command and response system to communicate with workers aloft. Understand how to handle lines in simple rigging situations. And be able to assist the climber or aerial lift operator.
As you can see, there's a lot to learn about tree care operations and coordinating work with the arborist aloft.
On behalf of the NAA,
And the ISA,
please work safely.